This video is dedicated to the content about design during the Industrial Revolution. I'm also going to be talking about how to take notes in this class and ways that you can strategize so that you make the most of the time you're spending on the videos and in the reading. When you're reading, you should always have a goal. I guess when you're reading for school, if you're just reading for pleasure, that's something else. But in my class, what you should be thinking about as you start your reading and as you start engaging with this content, what question should I ask myself as I study this material? What kind of information will be the most useful for my assignments and thematic essays? In order to do this, you really should look at the assignments ahead of time. For example, this week, the discussion question has several examples of graphic design objects from before 1860, and I want you to respond to the images with visual analysis of the stylistic strategies or the significance of the techniques presented there. You can also put your opinion in. So on this slide, I have the 4 images that I used for the discussion. So if you go into the discussion in Canvas and you scroll down, you'll see these are the 4 images. And so as you go through the textbook, these are the things that you should be looking out for. Similarly, as you go through this lecture, I would pay attention to these particular images. Next, read the assignment. How does William Morris respond to the design strategies of the first half of the 19th century? Prove your thesis with visual analysis of a specific artwork by Morris. Is his alternative a viable solution? So, I'm not going to talk about Morris specifically in this video, but I will be talking about design strategies in the first half of the 19th century. And so this question, this assignment is basically asking you to think about how does Morris respond to everything that I'm presenting here? So understanding what I'm presenting in this particular lecture will help you to complete the assignment. And then finally, for Unit 1, you have a thematic essay in which you're supposed to think about and develop a thesis about the 19th century's contribution to graphic design. Honestly, you could probably write that essay after this lecture because I'm introducing a lot of techniques, technologies, and ideas that become really important for graphic design history. So keep that in mind as you go through the material. All right, so if I were preparing as a student to look at this, these are the keywords I'd be looking for. Stylistic strategies. So that's a term I use a lot, and it's a way of talking about the principles and elements of design that we see repeated in a particular time period. You want to look out for those specific images that appear in the discussion. You'll want to think about what did William Morris design and how do they respond to earlier graphic design solutions. Again, that's not going to appear in this video, but it's something that you can keep in the back of your head as you continue to work through this. And then finally, what are the major contributions of this period and what images might best demonstrate those contributions? All right, so now we're getting into the content. This slide talks about design during the Industrial Revolution. There is a huge expansion of visual materials because presses are automated. Now we have newspaper broadsheets and posters. Those are the most common types of visual materials now. That's different from before. Before it was books. Now it's these ephemeral objects, these broadsheets and posters that really are not supposed to last very long. You develop really incredibly innovative typefaces for decorative and display purposes. So we'll be looking at all of the new typefaces, well, not all of them, but some examples of new typefaces. And then finally, the idea that graphic design is a profession that's separate from other art making professions, that begins to happen now. At this point, we will see that there is a separation between the actual production of these images and the design of them. And that results in some conflict in what these things look like. Anyway, let's just dive into the material and start to think about it. So this is the steam-powered printing press. It prints 1,000 pages an hour. That was like crazy in terms of how many things you could produce. And so what it means is that visual media is much less expensive. And so it starts to appear everywhere. This is a lithograph. It's a caricature by the French lithographer Honoré Daumier. and he's making fun of the way that everybody wants to appear in the newspaper. And the caption is basically like, I don't care what you say about me as long as you're talking about me. And you see this in every part of this visual media because everybody wants to have posters and newspapers and some sort of representation, and it's so much more affordable. And so the cities become like literally overrun with visual media. So this is a photograph of a hoarding. A hoarding is a designated kiosk or space where posters could be legally hung. And so you would get these places that would just covered with posters. Every day more posters would be put up. And it was just visually overwhelming. I mean, I think a lot of the way we think of urban spaces is similar. It comes out of this period because all of a sudden visual media is cheap to produce and there's a lot of it. I think it's also comparable to the digital explosion that happened in the last 30 years, where all of a sudden this digital space becomes overrun with images because it's so inexpensive to produce it. Anyway, so this gives you a sense of why they're making these posters and what the competition is. So as you look at this photograph, notice the wide variety of font. Something that happens during this time is that you can print font really, really big, and it's not as expensive. And so you see the development of typography that's designed to be produced really large like this. So this is from much earlier in the 19th century. This is sans serif. Sans serif is invented in the 19th century, and this is Caslon's Egyptian type. Now, there is nothing about this that's Egyptian, right? Not a thing. However, the Caslon foundry named it Egyptian because in the early 19th century, Egyptian things were like a major trend. And so it's basically like naming themselves something trendy so that more people will want to buy that particular font. Anyway, so this is sans serif. Sans serif is really like visible. It doesn't blend in. It's kind of harsh. Also, it can expand very easily that you can make it quite large. Around the same time is the invention of slab serif. So instead of the small, elegantly designed serifs that we saw in the Roman de Roy, here we have the slab serif, where it's, again, just about being big and large and in your face. These are wood type fonts that are developed, again, because they just want to be seen. And these are, they're really loud. Some people don't like them, but I mean, they're kind of fabulous, right? And they get your attention. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get the attention of the viewers in a very crowded visual space. This is an example of industrial design. So the poster here is advertising a predecessor of the modern circus. So Astley's Circus was in London and it featured performing horses. And so this is a poster that would go up to try and encourage you to come to the circus. And what do they have in the center? A giant horse. This is an innovative poster actually because it integrates both text and image. So this woodblock horse at the very center, it was made using woodblock technique. It would really be eye-catching. And then on either side, you have just a slew of red text that tells you all of the different things that you can see at the circus. You'll notice it uses a wide variety of text, and every last bit of it is filled with information about the circus. So we will be analyzing this in the discussion, but I just wanted to first introduce it here so you got a sense of its background, like what it's advertising, but we can talk about it more in the discussion. So why do these images look the way they do? Most people that are producing images now have no visual arts training. So remember, in the earlier period, book designers have a lot of training in the visual arts because they have to produce the typography, and it's sculptural, or they're producing wood blocks to make the images in the books, and that also requires an artistic training background. We saw that with the Astley Circus poster, right? That horse was designed by an artist, but the people who produced the text probably weren't trained as artists. The other thing, all of these objects are only meant to last a few days. You want to get it up as quickly as possible. And so there is a sense that this is not valuable, that we don't need to spend time designing it because we just want it to be visible. We just want it to be up and then it's going to be gone. Also, it's not clear that if it's more artistically produced that you're necessarily going to increase business. Now, graphic design as a profession begins when the task of designing this printed material is separated from the task of printing it. This happens over the course of the 19th century. The idea of a graphic designer is really invented in the late 1890s, and the term isn't used until the 1920s. And so what we're seeing here is the very beginning of what we think of as graphic design today. And so there really aren't rules. They're kind of figuring it out as they go along. So let's look at some of the ways that artists respond to this. Okay, this time period coincides with the reign of Queen Victoria. And Victoria and her husband Albert were really interested in industrialization and what they saw as this industrial spirit and the culture and moral standards that accompanied it. A very important aesthetic theorist during this time is A.W.M. Pugin. He says that design is a moral act. He thinks of design as encompassing everything that you would see and that it is going to shape your worldview. He's really interested in Gothic design. He sees that as being the highest design. And this kind of utopian worldview really influences William Morris and his later arts and crafts movement. As we talk about Victorian design, it's really important to talk about chromolithography. Chromolithography is so important because it's the first affordable color printing. It's developed in Germany. That being said, the business end of it is really mastered in the United States by American printers. So here's a picture of Pugin, a painting of him. You can see his life dates 1812 to 1852. So he dies before William Morris and his arts and crafts movement comes underway. But he's very influential. He designed the ornamental system for the new British Parliament. So when you think of the Houses of Parliament today and Big Ben, all of that was designed by Pugin. It has this Gothic look. He thinks of Gothic as not a style, but a principle. And that design needs to do more than look good. It should inform the viewer of their worldview. So it's this very utopian, idealized view. These ideas are picked up by Owen Jones. Jones writes that the decorative arts arise from and should be properly attendant upon architecture. Now, he was an architect, so he was biased. But ultimately, he really didn't want to see any type of separation between the arts. He sees all of them as kind of falling under the same principles. And architecture is the thing that unifies them. So thinking again about Gothic, all of the windows are painted, all of the wooden pews and things inside are also produced by artists. And none of these things is necessarily more important than the other, according to Jones. So he produces this book called The Grammar of Ornament, and it's a manual for how to integrate ornament into objects. We care about it because it's produced with chromolithography. So this is one page of it, Chinese patterns, and you can see that he basically goes around the world to different cultures and tries to isolate different ornamental elements from those cultures in a way that a viewer could just kind of pick the different things that they want. This is produced with chromolithography. It is a very, very high quality book. It wasn't cheap, but it demonstrated that chromolithography could also be beautiful and highly artistic. So here's one page of it. Remember, he is an architect. Here he's looking at Islamic architecture in Spain. And you can see how incredibly detailed and gorgeous this is. So every single color here is produced with a different lithographic stone in order to result in this overall effect of the color. So you see here he's including all the ornament, but it's produced using a modern 19th century technique. Jones also made less illustrious things. So these are playing cards. He designed these playing cards and they're printed with chromolithography. But the place you see chromolithography the most is package design. So here we're looking at package designs that were chromolithographed onto tin for food and tobacco products. And these were made in the United States. And you can see here all of the same type of design principles that we saw in the Siege of Troy poster. Leave no space uncovered, use lots of different colors to catch the eye of the viewer, and use lots of different fonts, all of these different experimental ways of incorporating color and grabbing your viewer's attention. Anyway, so as you move into the next part of this week's content, learning about William Morris, keep all of these objects in mind because Morris is directly responding to this type of design.